kvetching and complaining about the weather is not really appropriate. After all, the weather comes from God. When we kvetch and complain about the weather, by extension, we're kvetching and complaining about that which God gives us. True, we chose to live here in Toronto where it's rather cold, but hey, we knew what we're getting into. Nobody told us that it was going to be 20 degrees in January in Toronto, so we're living in a cold place, and it's our purview to warm things up. And what better way to warm the airways than with words of Torah and words and inspiration? I have to say that I've been thinking that although we, the Jewish people, live apart from society, we are at the same time still very much a part of society. And we are influenced by the things that happen around us, or we influence the things that happen around us. It's really impossible to separate yourself entirely. We're either going to influence or be influenced. There's a fascinating halacha about the koshering of meat. So meat has to be slaughtered ritually in a quick and painless way, which is extremely humane. And then we, Jewish people, following the laws of the Torah, do not consume blood. That's because the blood is not really digested, but injected directly into our bloodstream. And as such, if we would have the blood of animals coursing through our veins, it would make us more animalistic and desensitize us and rob us of certain human qualities and elements that we should strive to nurture and develop. So the things that we absorb, foreign things, we have to absorb through a process of digestion. Simply or easily assimilate things that we eat or ingest into our persona. There's this idea that we can't eat blood. So how do you get rid of the blood? I mean, meat is always full of blood, right? And the answer is that we apply a heavy layer of coarse salt. This is known as kosher salt for that reason, because we use the coarse salt to be able to extract the blood. And we don't use fine salt or table salt because it would simply be absorbed or sink into the meat. So we use coarse salt. It's the kind of salt that they use to salt our streets when we have snowy or icy days. And the nature of salt is that it draws forth. And the big question is, yes, the salt might be drawing the blood out of the meat, but wouldn't the blood then naturally sink back into the meat? And the answer to this question is that Aidi the Torah lemiflat leibola. Because the blood is right now making its way out or being drawn out of the meat, so it's not able to absorb the blood. But of course, after a certain amount of time, which we take to be 18 minutes, passes, then we have to bang off the salt and rinse off the meat, and that's how the meat becomes kosher. So now you know, Martin, and I know why kosher meat is invariably going to be a little more salty than other meat that you might buy. And why am I sharing this? Well, I'm sharing this because we either are going to be absorbing what's going on around us, or we are going to be expelling or giving something to our environment and our surroundings. Here in Canada, we're living in a very strange time. We don't really have a functioning government, and I think that political leadership has been far less than satisfying. A lot of very disappointing things.
That's looking to take over our country.
Well, like I said, a lot of strange things in government going on around us. I don't even know what to say about these threats coming from across the border. I somehow think it's all a big bluff. It's kind of a negotiating game. But when you see a less than savory leadership, one of two things can happen. Either we can start to emulate what we see happening around us, and we can start to think that that's actually called leadership, or we can become the trendsetters and we can influence others as to what leadership is supposed to look like. And that brings me to this week's Torah portion, and specifically it brings me to the reading of the fourth day of the week, Wednesday of Parshat Vayechi. Yaakov gathers his children together. He wants to give them the goods on the future. The divine presence departs from him. A lot to say about that. Let's just, in a synoptic fashion, say that Yaakov instead focuses on giving his children last will and testament. and he doesn't spare his children. He's very critical, not because he wants to make his children feel bad, but because he wants them to know what they have to work on and the details they have to try to rectify. So by focusing on their misdeeds and mistakes, Yaakov is giving a very, very clear message as to what they should be working on in the future. And he criticizes. He criticizes Reuven. He criticizes Shimon. He criticizes Levi. He doesn't overtly bless them. We don't find any verses of blessing. And as the Medrash Rabbah tells, they back away from their father, shamefaced, and they're not very they're not feeling very good about themselves. Although what they're hearing is what they need to hear. And sometimes we don't need to feel good about ourselves. Sometimes we need to hear what is important so that we will try and make a difference. Now Yehuda, seeing all of this, recoils. He's very fearful that he is going to be rebuked as well. And there's the incident with Tamar, and I'm not going to go through all of that. Anybody who is listening or watching on Facebook can simply open their Chumash to the Parsha 2 weeks ago, and you read the story. It's not pretty. And so Yehuda backs away, and Yaakov Avinu calls out to him, and it says, Yehuda, Ata Yeducha Achecha, you are different from your brothers. I want to speak to you. And he says, you were different, and Rashi cites the Medrash. He says, you were different than your brothers because you conceded to the incident of Tamar, and you conceded that you made mistakes. Reuven is not the leader. Shimon is not the leader. Even Levi is not the tribe that embodies leadership. It's Yehuda that embodies leadership. And I want to say this. When we have leaders who drop the ball, who refuse to take responsibility, who find a way to apportion blame everywhere with the exception of their own plate, then you know that this is not the Torah paradigm of leadership. It is true that Reuven also tried to save Yosef, but ultimately he failed. He accomplished nothing. It is true that Reuven admitted his wrongdoing and meddling in his father's personal affairs. True, but he never helped anybody as a result of it. The true leader is the one who takes responsibility for his or her failings. And if you see leadership that refuses to take responsibility for their failings, then you must know this is not the kind of leadership that we should be emulating. Each and every one of us is a leader in his or her own small way, whether it is for a circle of friends, an orbit of influence, your own family. We each have a leadership role to play. And leadership begins with the taking of responsibility for things that weren't done as well as they should have been, or actual mistakes made. And leadership begins when you make a difference, a positive difference in somebody else's life and for others' well-being. Leadership is never about what is good for the leader. It is always about what is good for the other, for the flock, and for the nation. And I hope that as we read Parshat Vayechi and absorb its messages, that we will choose to live by these messages rather than the kind of things we see unfolding around us. That we will each learn to take responsibility. And taking responsibility means acknowledging the things we did that weren't as well as they should have been. And acknowledging and taking responsibility means asking ourselves on a regular basis, what can I do to make somebody else's life better? How can I uplift? How can I influence? How can I transform? How can I become a source of goodness and inspiration for others? And Martin, I have to tell you this because you are a leader in a way. You're a radio show host today. You have thousands of people that are listening to your voice, as do I, and that gives both of us a great deal of responsibility. This is not about us spouting off. It's not about us speaking the things we like to speak about. It's about us asking ourselves real questions every day. Questions like, what can I say that'll make a difference in somebody else's life? How can I inspire somebody else? How can I uplift somebody else? How can I make a positive contribution? And if each and every single one of us lives his or her life that way, taking responsibility and making efforts, real efforts, sincere efforts, to make a positive difference in the lives of others, surely we will succeed. As our sages said, Yagaita, if you toil, umatzasa, and you find success, tamen, that is the only circumstance or situation that is truly believable. It is really impossible for us to give it our best effort and to fail when it comes to our avodat Hashem, when it comes to us fulfilling our mission and our calling in life. So give it all you got, have faith and trust in Hashem, and surely we will be able to hear and share good news. By taking responsibility, we will do our part in accelerating the process of universal redemption and of creating a better world for us and those around us. May we merit to see the coming of Mashiach as a result of the efforts we collectively make, bimheira u'biyamenu, speedily and in our days. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kaplan. Words to think about. Never thought of myself as a leader. However, I guess usually we'll see that, so maybe I am.
You know what, Martin? By default, you've been thrust into the position.
On to our next guest.
But the truth is, my friends, each and every one of us is put in a position by Hashem. You need to do your part. Have a great day.